The beginning of the journey. More than 1,000 years ago, a group of people decided to embark on a journey that would change the course of history. These people, whose names have been lost to time, were part of a society in the northwest of the Indian subcontinent, in what we now know as the regions of Punjab and Rajasthan. They were artisans, blacksmiths, and musicians, people of low castes living under a strict social system who likely felt trapped by the limitations imposed by their environment. Thus began their exodus, a journey that would lead them to become one of the most enigmatic peoples in the world. The Gypsies, or as they call themselves, the Romani. If this is your first time on the channel, subscribe now so you don't miss any important content about the darkest chapters of our history. The beginning of the journey. In the 10th century, the territories of India were in a constant state of turmoil. Foreign invaders, including the Persians and Turks, ravaged the northwestern regions of India, and many peoples were forced to flee in search of safety. The ancestors of the Gypsies were part of one of those groups who, faced with the threat of losing everything, chose movement over submission. In their homeland, they were already a people who moved from place to place, making a living as blacksmiths and musicians, but now their journey took on a new purpose: to find a place where they could live in peace and prosper. Historical records of this migration are scarce, but genetic and linguistic evidence tells us that the Gypsies' journey first took them through Persia. For centuries, this nomadic group moved through Persian lands, adopting and adapting elements of the local culture to their own traditions. Their language, which we now know as Romani, began to incorporate Persian words, and its structure was enriched by foreign influences. Life in Persia offered them a temporary respite, but as so often in their history, circumstances would change. New horizons. The Byzantine Empire. By the 13th century, the Gypsies continued their migration westward, crossing the Caucasus Mountains and entering the vast territory of the Byzantine Empire. It was there that they became more visible to the chroniclers of the time. They were known as the Athinganoi, a term that seems to have mystical connotations and reflected their nomadic nature and their abilities in healing and divination. The Byzantines, intrigued by these foreigners who seemed to have no fixed home, began to see in them an air of mystery and exoticism. Throughout the cities and towns of Byzantium, the Gypsies offered their services as blacksmiths, musicians, and healers, and their fame began to grow. They were attributed with mystical powers and special abilities, which provided both an opportunity and a risk. On one hand, they were welcomed for their talent in music and dance, which earned them a place in local courts and festivities. On the other, their enigmatic character and spiritual practices made them targets of distrust and fear. The crossing into Europe. A new adventure. As the Gypsies settled in Byzantium, it became clear that their nomadic spirit and search for opportunity would not allow them to stay in one place for long. Thus, they began to move westward, entering the Balkans and gradually into Central and Western Europe. They arrived in Greece, Bulgaria, Romania, and Hungary, settling temporarily in each place, adapting to local customs and learning local languages, yet always maintaining their identity as a people who belonged to many places, but none in particular. In their movements through Europe, the Gypsies often presented themselves as Christian pilgrims seeking refuge and protection. In many places, they were received with hospitality and curiosity. Europeans, who had never seen a group of people with such distinct features and customs, initially welcomed them, intrigued by their music and craft skills. However, over time, things began to change. The Gypsies, always on the move, were difficult to understand for the sedentary communities of Europe. Distrust arose. Who were these foreigners who didn't seem to belong anywhere? Why did they prefer to move from place to place instead of settling down and living like the rest of the population? Stories and rumors about them multiplied. Some said they came from Egypt, hence in English they were called Gypsies, a distortion of Egyptian. This myth, though false, helped to increase the mysticism surrounding the Gypsies. The price of being different. As the Gypsies settled in different parts of Europe, attitudes towards them began to turn hostile. The Gypsies, with their itinerant lifestyle and different customs, did not fit into medieval European societies that valued stability and integration. Laws began to emerge that sought to control their movements and force them to assimilate or, failing that, to leave the territories. In Spain, the Catholic monarchs enacted laws that forced the Gypsies to abandon their nomadic way of life and settle permanently. They were required to adopt local dress and customs, and those who did not were harshly punished. However, the Gypsy culture, resilient and adaptive, managed to survive. In each new place, the Gypsies adopted elements of the local culture, but always preserved their essence. Gypsy art and resilience. Despite persecution and marginalization, the Gypsies managed to leave an indelible mark on European cultures. Their music, dance, and art became an integral part of the traditions of the countries in which they lived. In Spain, for example, Gypsy music fused with Arab and Spanish influences to give rise to flamenco, a passionate style of music and dance that reflects both the pain and joy of a people who have witnessed centuries of persecution and struggle. In addition to music, the image of the Gypsy as a fortune teller or mystic became popular in Europe. In many markets and festivals, Gypsies offered their services as palm readers and fortune tellers, perpetuating the image of a people with special knowledge of fate and the future. This image, though partly constructed by popular imagination, also reflects a truth. Gypsies have maintained for centuries traditions and knowledge that date back to their origins in India and Persia. The 20th century. Darkness and light. The journey of the Gypsies through Europe has not always been easy, and the 20th century brought one of the darkest chapters in their history. During World War II, the Gypsies were persecuted by the Nazis in an attempt at extermination that resulted in the death of hundreds of thousands of people in what is known as the Parajmos, or the Devouring. This tragedy is a fundamental part of Gypsy history, but it is also a testament to their resilience and survival. After the war, the Gypsies continued to fight for their rights and identity in a Europe that still viewed them with suspicion. However, in recent decades, many Gypsy groups have begun to gain recognition for their cultural contributions and history. In the 21st century, their music, art, and culture continue to be celebrated, and the fight for their rights and recognition goes on. A people on the move. A legacy that endures. The history of the Gypsies is that of a people in constant movement, but it is also a history of adaptation, resistance, and the search for a place in the world. From their origins in the lands of northwest India to the streets of Europe's great cities, the Gypsies have been witnesses to and participants in history. And although their path has been marked by suffering and persecution, it has also been full of music, art, and a deep connection to their roots. The history of the Gypsies is not just a physical journey across continents, but a cultural and spiritual journey that continues to inspire and awaken curiosity to this day. It is a reminder of the richness that diversity brings and how a people can maintain their identity even when circumstances seem to conspire to erase it. If you've made it this far and learned something new from our stories, subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss our upcoming videos. Together, we can discover and remember the truths that history often tries to hide.